I met Father Seraphim rose through my friend George Lednev, who was an engineer but had many interests in the Orthodox Church and other areas totally unconnected with the church, like ballet. He took me to Platina and introduced me to Father Seraphim. In those days, Platina was just beginning as a monastery. It was a strange experience because it was a totally wild place. No water. We had to carry water in buckets up an impossible hillside. There was no electricity to speak of, and we slept in zipped up bags to avoid scorpions, which were all around us. Father Seraphim himself was a charismatic person, very matter of fact. He never talked about his past or the future. He talked only about the present. He lived in the present moment. That was the moment to capitalize on and do things now, today. My job was to work with George in building some new cells. So I did what I was not accustomed to do, saw wood, carry wood, pounded nails, and so on. And Father Seraphim was working all around us, much faster than George, and George much faster than me. So I could see Father Seraphim gently frowning on my poor efforts. We had, of course, a lot of new monks and novices all around. Everybody was doing their work. We were in the middle of a new beginning. It was a difficult experience for me because I was not built to do hard physical work. 8 hours a day or more, and then attend night services. On top of that, sleep sporadically. And but the experience was a jolting one, I would say. In summary, I found Father Seraphim a most fascinating person, riveting and hypnotic. As far as I know, he was a protege of Bishop John, who persuaded him or guided him or encouraged him in some ways to get Platina started. And there was this connection between the two, each of whom became a saint. My next relevant meeting with Father Seraphim, besides many sporadic meetings in various places, including Platina, but casual meetings. My next meeting was at his coffin. A strange thing happened. George Lednev called me very early in the morning, almost in the middle of the night, to say I had a strange dream. I saw Father Seraphim in my dream striding uphill and saying, "George, I'm free now. I'm free and you cannot follow me." George said, "Father Seraphim must have died." And George knew before the news were announced. Father Seraphim announced it to George first, and George announced it to me. So we both knew he was dead before the rest of the world could be told. So I was prepared to go to the funeral, which I did. George was not there. So since he was employed and had a family to support, he had no choice. He was working for the U.S. government. The crowds were enormous, and the crowds pushed me right next to the coffin, and I stood by the coffin the whole duration of the funeral service. The funeral service was a jubilant one, like celebration of resurrection. I could see Father Seraphim's face, and I could touch his hands. They were soft, flexible, and not cold at all. And he looked in his coffin like he was ready to spring up and walk. An eerie feeling. There were the chapel, which I knew from my previous visits to Platina, was overfilled to capacity, and I was pressed against the coffin by the crowd. There were photographers all over the place, clicking their cameras on the coffin, and I prayed, saying, "Please preserve me from being in the center, since I was right there by the coffin. I believe it or not, not a single of those hundreds of photographs showed me. No, it's as if I never existed. Strange occurrence, but I don't know what made me say that prayer, but I did. And it was granted instantly. I have a feeling that Saint Seraphim and Saint John had something to do with it. It was their style, this type of gentle humor. Then my next visit to Platina was after the chapel was burned down, and it was quite a sight. The trees around the chapel were singed, but intact. It is as if the chapel was consumed as a burnt offering. An eerie experience. I've never seen anything like this in my life. Total destruction by fire, and everything around untouched. Now, I don't know what to make of this sign. Father Seraphim gave me some books, unfortunately unsigned. Maybe again he didn't want me to boast about it. So I still have his books, which I've read, and I'm waiting for his icon to appear in our house. St. John's icon is in our house. By the way, the Greek Church recognized the Romanovs as saints and St. John as saints before the Orthodox Church officially did. The Greek old calendarists knew their saints. Well, all I can add to what I know of Father Seraphim is that after those few brief and somewhat baffling experiences, I knew he would be a saint. That I was convinced of. That's the only thing I can add. Why, I have no idea, but I knew he was the next saint in line.